Can you drive me home without asking why? These 7 words from a drunk CEO to a desperate father started everything. Marcus needed money for his daughter's surgery. Victoria needed someone to trust after ultimate betrayal. Neither expected that saving a little girl's hearing would teach 2 broken adults that sometimes the best love stories begin with the worst nights. Marcus Brooks worked 2 jobs not by choice but by necessity. By day, he navigated the city's maze of streets as a rideshare driver, memorizing shortcuts and learning to read passengers' moods in rearview mirror glances. By night, he transformed into something else, entirely, at this upscale establishment, mixing drinks with the same careful attention he'd once given to reviewing patient charts. The transition from doctor to driver hadn't been gradual. It had been as sudden and violent as the accident that took everything from him 2 years ago. His daughter Emma was 6 years old now, though she inhabited a world growing increasingly silent. The hearing loss had started subtly missed calls from across the playground, the television volume creeping higher. Now, without the surgery scheduled in 2 weeks, that silence threatened to become permanent. Every dollar Marcus earned, every exhausting double shift, every moment stolen from sleep, went toward the mounting medical bills that insurance wouldn't fully cover. Victoria's story unfolded in opposite directions. At 30, she commanded a technology investment firm that moved millions with her signature. She'd built walls of competence and calculation around herself, each brick mortared with the lessons of a childhood spent in foster homes, where affection came with conditions and trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. The conference rooms where she now presided had become her kingdom, the quarterly reports her gospels. She believed in numbers because numbers didn't lie, didn't betray, didn't disappear in the middle of the night, leaving only a note and an empty dresser drawer. But tonight, those numbers had turned against her. The CFO she'd trusted, mentored, and considered her only real confidant in the corporate maze had been photographed in a downtown restaurant, sliding documents across a table to her biggest competitor. The betrayal cut deeper than any childhood abandonment, because this time, she'd chosen to trust. This time, she'd thought she was smart enough to know better. The rooftop bar had seemed like the right place to disappear into expensive alcohol and anonymous faces. She'd ordered drink after drink, each one a small rebellion against the control she'd maintained for so long. The other patrons gave her space, recognizing either her face from business magazines or simply the aura of someone drinking alone by choice. Marcus had noticed her from behind the bar, not because he recognized her. He didn't read those magazines anymore, but because he recognized the particular way someone held themselves when they were 1 drink away from shattering. "Your keys," he said quietly when she stood to leave, swaying slightly despite her efforts to appear steady. "I'm perfectly capable of driving myself home." The words came out sharp but hollow, like arrows with no points. "I'm sure you're capable of many things. Driving tonight isn't one of them." Something in his tone, not condescending, not pitying, just matter of fact, made her pause. She looked at him properly for the first time, taking in the slight gray at his temples, the careful way he moved, the hands that seemed too precise for someone who simply mixed drinks. "Fine. You drive then. I assume you know how to do that without asking questions?" Marcus nodded, signaling to another bartender to cover his station. He'd lose tips for leaving early, but something about this woman's particular brand of controlled desperation felt familiar. He'd worn that same expression in hospital bathroom mirrors, trying to hold himself together with willpower and soap-scented water. Her car was exactly what he'd expected, a black Tesla, sleek and silent as a shadow. She gave him the address without looking at him, then curled against the passenger window like she was trying to become part of the glass. The city lights blurred past in streams of gold and red, each traffic light a pause in their strange journey together. "Do you ever wish you could just disappear?" The question came so quietly he almost missed it, her breath fogging the window as she spoke. Marcus considered his answer carefully, navigating a turn while weighing his words. "Disappearing is easy. It's the staying that takes courage." She turned to look at him then, really look at him, as if seeing past the uniform and the careful professional distance he maintained. "You sound like someone who's tried both. We all have our stories, Miss Sterling. You know who I am? Your building has your company's name on it. Hard to miss when you're driving past." She laughed, but it was bitter as burnt coffee. "Of course. The name on the building. That's all anyone ever sees anyway. They drove in silence after that, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that exists between people who understand that sometimes words are too small for what needs to be said. When they reached her building, a converted warehouse in the arts district that probably cost more than most people's lifetime earnings, she hesitated before getting out. "Thank you," she said, and meant it in ways that had nothing to do with the ride. Marcus watched her walk to her door, waiting until she was safely inside before driving away. He thought that would be the end of it. Just another strange encounter in a city full of them. But the next morning, his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Brooks? This is Victoria Sterling's assistant. Miss Sterling would like to meet with you regarding a business proposition." The office was everything Marcus had expected, and nothing like it at the same time. Yes, there was the floor-to-ceiling glass, the minimalist furniture that probably cost more than his monthly rent, the view that turned the city into a painting. But there were also unexpected touches. A child's drawing framed beside million-dollar contracts, a coffee mug with a chip in the handle sitting beside pristine china, a throw blanket draped over a leather chair, like someone actually lived here instead of just worked. Victoria stood by the window when he entered, her back to him, posture perfect as a dancer's. Today she wore gray, severe and structured, as if the clothes could provide the control the alcohol had stripped away. "I need a driver," she said without preamble, still facing the window. 7 days, 12 hours a day. I'll pay $5,000. Marcus calculated quickly. That would cover most of Emma's surgery costs, leave enough for the medications she'd need after. But something about the offer felt off. Too generous for simple driving. "Why me?" She turned then, and he saw that the vulnerability from last night had been carefully packed away, replaced with something harder but more fragile, like ice over deep water. "Because you didn't take advantage when you could have. Because you didn't ask questions when I needed silence. And because I need someone I can trust for what comes next. Which is finding out who else in my company is selling me out to competitors." Marcus understood then. She didn't just need a driver. She needed a witness. Someone outside her circle, who could observe without being observed. Someone invisible enough to be forgotten, but smart enough to remember. "I have conditions," he said. Her eyebrow raised slightly. The only sign of surprise she allowed herself. "Such as? I need flexibility for 1 phone call a day. My daughter. And I can't work past 7 on Thursday. That's non-negotiable." Something flickered in her expression, gone before he could identify it. "Done. You start tomorrow, 6 a.m. sharp." The first 3 days established a rhythm. Marcus would arrive to find her already waiting. Dressed in armor of expensive fabric and careful makeup, she conducted business from the back seat, taking calls that moved millions while he navigated traffic. She treated him like furniture present but unnoticed, necessary but unacknowledged. He didn't mind. Invisibility had become comfortable since leaving medicine, a way to exist without the weight of expectations. But small things began to crack that professional distance. The way she automatically said please when giving him addresses, even when distracted by calls. How she noticed when he adjusted the air conditioning and quietly mentioned she was comfortable. No need to change it for her. The morning she handed him coffee without being asked, prepared exactly how he liked it, though he'd never told her his preferences. On the 4th day, everything shifted. They were parked outside a law firm, waiting while she finished a call about patent disputes. Emma called just as Victoria ended her conversation. Marcus answered quickly, intending to keep it brief, but his daughter's voice filled the car through the Bluetooth before he could switch to the earpiece. "Daddy, my ear hurts again. Mrs. Patterson says I can lie down in the nurse's office, but I want you. Sweet pea. I'm working right now, but I'll come get you as soon as I can. Is it the same pain as yesterday? Worse. And the sounds are getting more fuzzy. Daddy, what if the operation doesn't work? What if I can't hear anything ever again?" Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles white with the effort of keeping his voice steady. "Hey, we talked about this. Doctor, Morrison is the best there is. You're going to be fine. Promise. I promise, Emma. Now let Mrs. Patterson give you some medicine for the pain, and I'll be there as soon as Miss Sterling is done with her meetings. Is Miss Sterling pretty?" Marcus caught Victoria's eyes in the rearview mirror, saw amusement there mixed with something else. She's my boss, M. That's not what I asked. I'll see you soon, sweet pea. I love you. Love you too, Daddy. Even if I can't hear you say it soon. The call ended, leaving silence that felt heavier than lead. Marcus stared straight ahead, waiting for Victoria to say something about personal calls during work hours, about maintaining professional boundaries. Instead, she asked quietly, how long has she been losing her hearing? 6 months. Started gradually, accelerating now. She has otosclerosis, abnormal bone growth in the middle ear. It's treatable with surgery, but the window is closing. 2 more weeks and the damage might be irreversible, and her mother died 2 years ago. Car accident. He didn't add the rest that he'd been the attending physician in the ER that night, that he'd had to choose between 2 critical patients, that choosing the other had meant watching his wife die while he saved a stranger. The stranger had lived. His wife had not. The medical board had cleared him of any wrongdoing, but Marcus had never cleared himself. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then, surprising them both, she said, I grew up in foster homes. 7 different ones before I aged out. You learn not to get attached to voices because they always leave eventually. But I remember every single one, every bedtime story, every lullaby, every good morning, and how was school. Your daughter will remember your voice, Mr. Brooks, no matter what happens. It was the most personal thing she'd said to him, offered like a gift he hadn't asked for but desperately needed. The moment broke when her phone rang, the board calling about an emergency meeting. But something had shifted between them. An understanding that went beyond employer and employee, beyond their careful professional distance. That evening, Marcus was preparing to leave when chaos erupted in the office. Victoria's assistant rushed past, papers flying, followed by the head of security and 2 lawyers. Through the glass walls of Victoria's office, Marcus could see her standing very still while people gestured wildly around her, their voices muffled but clearly agitated. He should have left. His shift was over. Emma was waiting. But something made him stay. Sitting in the reception area, pretending to read a magazine while the drama unfolded. An hour passed before the crowd dispersed, leaving Victoria alone in her office, staring at something on her computer screen. Marcus knocked quietly. She looked up, surprised to see him still there. I thought you left. Seemed like you might need a ride somewhere. She laughed. But it was hollow. I need a ride to somewhere that doesn't exist. Somewhere people don't steal everything you've built, while smiling at you over morning coffee. Who was it? David. My CFO. My friend. The only person I trusted with everything: access codes, financial records, strategic plans. He's been feeding information to Apex Industries for 6 months. They're going to announce a competing product next week using our research, our algorithms, everything we developed. She slumped in her chair, suddenly looking younger than her 30 years. I should have known. I should never have trusted anyone. Marcus moved into the office, sitting in the chair across from her desk. Can I tell you something? As someone who made the worst mistake of his life because he thought he knew everything? She nodded, too tired to maintain pretense. The mistake isn't trusting people. The mistake is thinking that when someone betrays that trust, it says something about you instead of them. You trusted because that's what humans do. He betrayed because that's what he chose to do. Don't let his choice change who you are. Easy to say when it's not your company about to be destroyed. No. But it was my wife who died because I made the wrong call. Different scale. Same guilt. Victoria looked at him sharply. You were there when she? I was the attending physician. 2 critical patients came in simultaneously. I had to choose who to treat first. I chose based on medical probability, the patient most likely to survive. That patient wasn't my wife. He'd never said it out loud before. Not like this. Not to someone who might understand the weight of choosing and losing simultaneously. That's not your fault, isn't it? I knew her injuries. Knew the statistics. I made the logical choice. The professional choice. But maybe if I'd chosen differently, let emotion override logic just once, you'd have lost them both. Victoria said quietly, And Emma would have no one. They sat in silence, two people carrying weights they'd never asked for but couldn't put down. Finally, Victoria straightened. I need your help, not just as a driver. David doesn't know that I know yet. I have 3 days before the board meeting where he plans to call for my resignation. 3 days to find proof of his betrayal and protect my company. What do you need me to do? Be my shadow. Come to meetings? Listen to conversations. Sometimes the invisible person sees the most. Marcus thought of Emma, of the surgery money, of the risk of getting involved in corporate warfare. Then he thought of this woman who'd just heard his worst failure and hadn't flinched. Okay, but we do this legally. No breaking and entering, no hacking, nothing that puts either of us in jail. Agreed. Though I should mention, it's not breaking and entering when you own the building. For the next 2 days, Marcus became Victoria's constant shadow. He stood in corners during meetings, taking mental notes of who seemed nervous, who avoided eye contact, who whispered in hallways when Victoria appeared. His medical training, the years of reading patient body language and detecting what people didn't say, proved unexpectedly valuable. It was Marcus who noticed that David's assistant, Jennifer, always scheduled his personal appointments for immediately after Victoria's strategic planning sessions. It was Marcus who observed that the IT director grew nervous whenever certain servers were mentioned. And it was Marcus who suggested they check the security footage from the parking garage, where people felt safe having conversations they wouldn't have inside. You're not just a driver, Victoria said on the 6th day as they reviewed the evidence they'd gathered. You're something else. Something more. I was a doctor. Internal medicine. Emergency specialty. Spent 12 years learning to see what people don't say, to piece together stories from symptoms. Why did you quit? Really? Marcus considered lying, giving her the simple version. But she'd earned more than that. After Sarah died, after I made that choice, I couldn't trust my judgment anymore. Every patient became a potential mistake. Every decision carried the weight of what I'd already lost. I started second-guessing everything, hesitating when hesitation could kill someone. So I walked away before I could hurt anyone else. But you're still saving people, just differently. Driving drunk executives home isn't exactly saving lives, isn't it? Victoria pulled up something on her computer, turned the screen toward him. It was a news article from 2 years ago, a car accident. A drunk driver who'd killed a family of 3. The driver's photo was familiar. Marcus had driven him home from a bar 6 months ago, taken his keys when he'd tried to drive drunk. You didn't know? Victoria asked, seeing his shock. He was too drunk to drive. Anyone would have done the same, but not everyone did. You did. Just like you stayed tonight, when you could have left. Just like you're helping me now, when it's not your fight. The moment stretched between them, fragile as spun glass. Then Emma called again, breaking the spell. This time, Marcus didn't try to hide the conversation. Hey, sweet pea. How was school? Quiet, Emma said, and Marcus could hear her trying to be brave. Everything's getting quieter, Daddy. But Mrs. Patterson taught me some sign language today. Want to see when you get home? I'd love that. Maybe you can teach me too? Yeah. Oh, and Daddy? I drew a picture of you at work. You're standing next to a really pretty lady with dark hair. Is that Miss Sterling? Marcus caught Victoria smiling slightly. Yes. That's her. Good. You look happy in the picture. You haven't looked happy in a long time. Children had a way of speaking truths adults spent years learning to hide. Marcus felt his face warm, but didn't deny it. After the call ended, Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then, carefully, as if the words were fragile, she said, The surgery. How much do you still need? That's not why I know. How much? 3,000. But I can't accept. It's not charity. It's not pity. It's one human helping another. Because she can. Because someone helped me once, when I was 17, and aging out of foster care with nowhere to go. My last foster mother, the only good one, gave me $5,000 she'd saved for her own retirement, said it was an investment in someone she believed in. I tried to pay her back years later. She refused. Told me to pay it forward instead. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I can't. You can. You will. Because it's not about you or your pride. It's about Emma hearing your voice for the rest of her life. The seventh day arrived too quickly. Tomorrow, their arrangement would end. Victoria would face the board with the evidence they'd gathered. Marcus would go back to his 2 jobs, though now with enough money for Emma's surgery. They should have been relieved. Instead, there was a tension neither acknowledged. A sense of something unfinished. The board meeting was scheduled for 4 o'clock. By 3:30, Victoria had everything prepared: documents, recordings, witness testimonies. David still didn't know she knew. Still smiled at her in the hallway with the same false warmth he'd perfected over years of betrayal. You should go, Victoria told Marcus as the board members began arriving. This isn't your fight anymore. But Marcus stayed, standing in the back of the conference room as the meeting began. He watched David present his case for why Victoria should step down, citing falling profits and questionable decisions. He watched Victoria sit quietly, letting him hang himself with his own words, and he watched her finally stand, commanding the room's attention with a presence that made everyone else seem small. Before we discuss my leadership, she said calmly, I'd like to present some interesting data our security team uncovered. What followed was a masterclass in controlled destruction. Victoria laid out David's betrayal piece by piece, each revelation building on the last until the full picture emerged: months of stolen data, secret meetings, bribes and promises that would have destroyed everything she'd built. David tried to deny it at first, then deflect, then finally sat in defeated silence as his carefully constructed plan crumbled. The board voted unanimously to terminate David immediately and pursue legal action. Several members apologized to Victoria for doubting her leadership. She accepted their apologies with grace, but without warmth, already planning the restructuring that would prevent such betrayal from happening again. As the room cleared, Marcus approached her. That was impressive. It was necessary. She looked tired suddenly, the adrenaline fading. And it wouldn't have happened without you. Thank you. It was just a job. No, she said firmly. It wasn't. We both know. It wasn't. They stood there. 2 people who'd found each other at exactly the wrong time. In exactly the right way. Marcus wanted to say something more, to acknowledge what had grown between them in 7 days of careful observation and unexpected honesty. But his phone buzzed Emma's school. There had been an incident. She'd collapsed during music class. Go, Victoria said immediately. Take my car. It's faster. Marcus ran, taking her keys without argument. The drive to the hospital was a blur of red lights ignored, and prayers muttered to a God he wasn't sure he still believed in. Emma was conscious when he arrived, but disoriented, her world now almost completely silent. The doctor confirmed what Marcus already knew: they couldn't wait 2 weeks. The surgery needed to happen within 48 hours, or the damage would be permanent. He was filling out paperwork, trying to figure out how to make the insurance cover more, when Victoria appeared. She must have followed immediately, though he hadn't noticed. How is she? Surgery tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. His hands shook as he signed forms. I should have done it sooner. Should have found a way. Stop. Victoria's voice was firm. You did everything you could with what you had. That's all anyone can do. Emma was awake in her hospital bed, eyes lighting up when she saw Victoria. You're the pretty lady from Daddy's work, she signed clumsily, still learning. Victoria looked at Marcus for translation. When he provided it, she smiled and moved closer to Emma's bed. And you're the artist who drew that beautiful picture, Victoria said, speaking slowly so Emma could read her lips. Emma beamed, then looked between Victoria and her father, with the calculating expression children get when they think they've figured out adult secrets. Are you why Daddy smiles now? Emma signed. Marcus didn't translate that one, but Victoria seemed to understand anyway. The night before surgery, Marcus didn't leave the hospital. Victoria didn't either. She set up a mobile office in the waiting room, handling the crisis aftermath while Marcus sat by Emma's bed, reading her favorite stories even though she couldn't hear them, because the rhythm of familiar words seemed to calm them both. At 3 a.m, Victoria found him in the hospital chapel, a place he hadn't entered since Sarah's death. Couldn't sleep either? She asked, sitting beside him on the worn wooden pew. I keep thinking about choices. How every choice eliminates 1,000 other possibilities. If I'd chosen differently 2 years ago, Sarah would be here. But then I think, if Sarah were here, I'd never have taken that job at the bar. Never would have driven you home. Never would have... this. And I don't know how to feel about that. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I think, she said slowly, that grief and gratitude can exist in the same space. You can mourn what was lost while still being thankful for what was found. They don't cancel each other out. They just coexist. Is that what this is? What we found? I don't know what this is, Victoria admitted. I know that a week ago, I trusted no one. Now I'm sitting in a hospital chapel at 3 a.m. because I can't imagine being anywhere else. I know that watching you with Emma makes me remember that love isn't always a weakness. And I know that when you leave tomorrow, after her surgery, something important leaves with you. What if I didn't leave? Marcus. Not romantically. Not yet. Neither of us is ready for that. But what if I didn't disappear? What if we just existed in the same space for a while? See what grows. Victoria looked at him, this man who'd driven her home when she was broken, who'd helped her save her company, who was now inviting her into his life's most fragile moment. I'd like that, she said simply. The surgery lasted 4 hours. Marcus paced the waiting room while Victoria worked on her laptop, but her eyes tracked his movement more than her screen. When the surgeon finally emerged, still in scrubs, both of them stood. It went perfectly, Dr. Morrison said. We were able to repair the damage completely. She'll need therapy to adjust to hearing again. But she's going to be fine. Marcus's knees nearly buckled with relief. Victoria's hand found his, squeezing once before, letting go. Emma woke up slowly, groggily, the world returning in pieces. But when Marcus whispered, "Hey, sweet pea," her eyes widened with wonder. "Daddy, I can hear you. It's fuzzy, but I can hear you." The joy on his daughter's face was worth every exhausting shift, every moment of doubt, every sacrifice he'd made to reach this moment. "And who's that?" Emma asked, pointing at Victoria. Her voice slurred from medication but clear with curiosity. "That's Victoria. She's a friend. The pretty lady who helped us?" Victoria moved closer to the bed. "How did you know I helped?" Emma smiled with the wisdom children sometimes possess. "Because Daddy only lets special people see him cry. And you're here." 3 months later, Marcus stood in front of a classroom at the medical school, teaching again for the first time since Sarah's death. He taught differently now, not just the science, but the humanity of medicine, the weight of choices, and the grace required to live with them. Victoria had restructured her company, implementing new security measures, but also something else, a healthcare initiative for employees' families, inspired by watching Emma's struggle. She'd asked Marcus to consult on it, to help design something that actually helped instead of just looking good in annual reports. They met for coffee twice a week. Nothing romantic, just two people slowly learning to trust. Emma often joined them, teaching Victoria sign language, even though she no longer needed it. Because, as Emma explained, sometimes the most important things don't need words. The rooftop bar hadn't changed. The same string lights, the same view of the city spread below like a promise. But when Marcus and Victoria sat at what had become their table, watching Emma practice her violin nearby, she'd started lessons the moment her hearing fully returned. Everything felt different. "I used to think strength meant not needing anyone," Victoria said, watching the city lights blur into streams of gold. "And now? Now I think it means knowing who to trust when you fall." Marcus thought about that first night, how he'd offered to drive her home without questions, how that small act had spiraled into something neither could have predicted. "I'm glad you fell," he said quietly. "I'm glad I was there to catch you, even though it complicated everything, especially because it complicated everything. Simple was killing me slowly. Complicated brought me back to life." Emma finished her piece, a simple melody that sounded like hope set to music. She ran over to them, violin clutched carefully in small hands. "Did you hear that? Could you hear all of it?" "Every note, sweet pea," Marcus assured her. "Even the mistakes?" "Those were the best parts," Victoria said, surprising them all. "The mistakes make it real. Perfect is boring." Emma considered this seriously, then nodded. I like her, Daddy. Can we keep her? Marcus and Victoria laughed, the sound mixing with the city noise and distant music from the bar, creating something new from broken pieces and unexpected grace. That's not really my decision alone, Em. Emma looked at Victoria expectantly. Victoria pretended to consider carefully. Well, I suppose someone needs to make sure your dad doesn't work himself to death. And someone needs to teach me proper sign language instead of the curse words you've been sneaking in. Emma giggled, caught out. Does that mean yes? It means we'll see, Victoria said, but her hand found Marcus's under the table. A quiet promise in the touch. They didn't kiss that night. They didn't make grand declarations or promises about forever. But when Victoria's driver arrived to take them home, she'd hired someone else. Someone who needed the job like Marcus once had. They all climbed in together, Emma chattering about her day while the adults listened with the patience of people who'd learned that the best things can't be rushed. The city blurred past the windows, millions of lives intersecting and diverging, each carrying their own stories of loss and discovery. But in that car, in that moment, three people who'd found each other through strange circumstances and desperate choices created a small pocket of possibility. Tell me a story, Emma requested, already drowsy from the long day. Victoria looked at Marcus, asking permission with her eyes. He nodded. Once upon a time, Victoria began, her voice soft as evening rain. There was a woman who thought she had to do everything alone. She built tall towers and filled them with important things. But the towers were cold and empty because she was afraid to let anyone else inside. That's sad, Emma murmured. It was. But one night, when she was very lost, a kind man offered to help her find her way home. He didn't ask for anything in return. He didn't need to know her secrets. He just knew she needed help. Like Daddy helps people. Exactly like that. And slowly, the woman learned that letting people in didn't make her towers weaker. It made them stronger. Because the best foundations aren't built from stone and steel. They're built from trust and courage and the belief that some people are worth the risk of believing in. Emma was asleep by the time they reached home, carried inside by her father while Victoria held doors and turned on lights. Domestic in a way that should have felt foreign but didn't. As Marcus tucked Emma into bed, Victoria stood in the doorway, watching. Stay for tea? Marcus asked quietly. You stay? Tea and conversation. Tea and silence. Tea and whatever feels right without feeling rushed. She stayed. Not just that night, but many nights after. Building something careful and considered from the ruins of what they'd both lost. Marcus returned to medicine gradually, teaching and consulting, finding ways to heal that didn't require him to carry the full weight alone. Victoria learned to delegate, to trust, to build a company that valued people as much as profit. Emma grew up surrounded by love that wasn't perfect but was real, learning from two people who'd found each other in the broken places and chosen to grow something new rather than simply repair what was damaged. Years later, when people asked how they'd met, they'd smile and say it started with a drive home. They didn't mention the alcohol, or the desperation, the betrayal, or the fear. Those parts of the story belonged to them, treasured not because they were beautiful but because they were true. But sometimes, on quiet evenings when Emma was practicing violin and the city lights sparkled below their apartment windows, Marcus would catch Victoria's eye, and they'd both remember that first night. How she'd asked him to drive her home without questions. How he'd said yes without conditions. How that simple exchange had been the first step towards something neither had dared to hope for a second chance at trust, at love, at building a life worth living. The string lights on the rooftop bar still glowed every night, watching over a city full of stories. But, for Marcus and Victoria, those lights would always mark the spot where everything changed, where a single dad drove a drunk CEO home, and her morning words, "I need to see you again," had indeed changed everything. Not with the dramatic flourish of movie endings, but with the quiet certainty of two people choosing each other, over and over, in small moments and grand gestures, in hospital waiting rooms and boardrooms, in silence and in laughter. They'd learned that love wasn't just the falling, but the choosing to catch each other, again and again, until falling and catching became indistinguishable from flying. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.